Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am so excited. We are back on Friday for another conscious breakthrough. And today we're going to be deep diving into a lot of soul and shadow work, which I know a lot of you love. We have the lovely Violet with us today, who
Hello.
is such an amazing soul. I actually connected with her when I was first getting deeper into energy healing and Reiki. And she's definitely someone that I was really excited to share with you guys so you can learn a lot about her and her experience. And today we're really going to talk about the soul and the human experience as well, how our soul can really expand, what's the purpose of the soul, as well as what's to come for the rest of our souls for the collective going into 2020, the end of 2020. So I'm super grateful. Thank you so much, Violet, for being here.
Absolutely.
Such a
Thank you for
great
having me.
such a great gift, such a great birthday gift. It's so funny because when I chatted with you, I most of my shifts and whatnot that I was talking about was on soul basis. And then ironically enough, we have our chat, which is on soul, which is so great. So I'm really, really excited. I want to let you introduce yourself to everyone first. So you can let people know your name and what you do and just your purpose in the space of consciousness.
Yeah. So, hello, everyone. I'm Violet Hatzigan. I am the owner of Wild Violet Oracle. I am a sixth generation traditional Usui Reiki master and educator of energetic awareness. I'm also a psychic medium.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Sixth generation. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, so Reiki, I could talk about Reiki all day, but Reiki has been around for a very long time, over 100 years, and it's obviously has come across the world really in so many ways in the last 100 years. So there's so many different forms of Reiki, or what I like to refer to as flavors of Reiki, if you will.
Yeah.
And traditional Usui Reiki was originally founded by Dr. Makao Usui, the original founder of
Mhm.
the lineage of Reiki. Yes.
Awesome. Well, that's really great. Like you have so many tools to you of like what a compass is and how you help people expand. So I'm really excited to learn more about it from you as well. And so are the followers. I'd love for you to just chat with me more about soul, because I know soul is a big part of people's expansion, especially when they're doing shadow work. And
Absolutely.
I know for me, it's been a big part. I know for a lot of the audience, as they question and ask questions on videos on the channel on shadow work, just giving them more of an understanding, like what is the soul? Like what is the concept of the soul?
Absolutely. And I always like to begin any type of discussion or lecture that I am merely here to speak my truth. And my truth was acquired from not only my own education and knowledge gain, but my own experience and what I've received from the collective realm, my spiritual counsel. So, with that being said, please take what resonates with you. And if it doesn't resonate with you, that's totally cool. Just leave it behind. So, in regards to the soul, our soul is an extension of source, if you will, the collective energy, God energy, however you feel called to depict it. And our soul, again, being an extension of source, is part of it's our essence. Truly, it's our essence and our soul and our core. And our soul entering into the physical realm to the human experience is really an opportunity for the development and the expansion of our soul. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. So it's like it's more of it's connected to the collective. And I love that because I talk a lot to people about how our experiences are mirrors of ourselves, and everything around us, every aspect of our life is a mirror of ourselves and anything attached to that energy, right? So I
Yes.
love that you said there's an essence of the collective, which is really, really important to
Yeah.
notice. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even though each of us have our own experience, like we're unique in our own soul's capacity, but we are still very much connected and intertwined from the basis, the beginning of source, the collective. So I always like to share that and encourage that understanding as well. So following through that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the soul's entrance into the physical realm, if you will. So,
Yeah.
and this is from my understanding. So, again, take it how you would like to. But from what I understand and what I've been taught is that when our soul reincarnates or we enter into the physical realm, we essentially are descending down from the collective energy, this very high vibrational energy and consciousness. And through that dissension, we sort of separate from this collective understanding. And this is a part of the process, because as we enter the physical realm, we do have to be at an understanding or an expansion of the human experience in order to live the human experience. So if we were still in our enlightened state of being at soul level, we wouldn't be taking the human experience probably as seriously, because we would know intuitively all the answers and we wouldn't have to learn the lessons. So through that descending into the human experience, we enter into the physical realm, the physical body.
Mm-hmm.
That runs into the realm of the karmic contract that we all, have agreed. I'm sure you've all have heard this. We've decided and signed our karmic contract before entering into this lifetime. And it was solely on our soul levels of agreement to learn certain lessons for our own soul's evolution. And through our unique path of our human experience and through our emotions and just our lessons and our growth and our development is really us, living our contract, living our soul experience.
I was actually going to ask you a question on that, because that is something that is definitely a big part of like this whole year and even coming into the season right now on karmic. So I want you to kind of just explain more of like, a lot of people mention to me, I see this pattern within my mom or my dad and whatnot, and just the connection of the soul in connection to the collective energy, including those that are close to us. How does that all kind of come in? I know that's
no, that's okay, because we also agree before coming into this lifetime who we are going to be learning lessons from. And, to become whole, truly, we have to have all the experiences. That's why in some lifetimes we experience heartache. Some lifetimes we experience, abundance in different realms. Every lifetime is different, but it's important that we live it and understanding that we are all encompassing and we are learning all the wisdom that needs to be acquired to come back to ourselves and fully become whole. But in regards to our immediate circle and the family members and the friends and the situations, it sounds to me kind of more on like the ancestral lineage, which is a huge part for many of our experiences in recognizing behaviors and, repetitive toxic cycles that we have been passed down through the lineage, and whether or not we choose in this lifetime to break it, to recognize it for what it is, learn the lesson for what it is, and choose to not continue that cycle. And I feel this year for many people have been really recognizing that in their own capacity.
Yeah, it's a huge, even myself included. I know a lot of people have been asking questions of like, the soul and noticing that they need to, like, universe is essentially telling them this is your time before it recycles a few years later and you have the same or similar lesson happen again. So I guess for you, like understanding the concept of the soul, and as we go through deeper work, what are some things that people can do on a daily basis to grow their intuition of understanding, the soul and the human experience? You know what I mean? The difference between the two, because they're two different things, right? Like I always tell people all the time, remember, we're a soul and a human body. So you have to take that into consideration. And I talk a lot about body pain and how that reacts to the soul and everything. So I'd love to know your concept on that. Like, how do we build a better relationship consciously with our soul?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we're all familiar with the term healing, constantly healing. I've heard from many people like, I always feel like I'm healing. Well, yes, this is the human experience. This is the lifelong journey until, you close your eyes and return your body back to the dirt and your soul back to source. You will have a continuous healing journey because that's what you karmically contracted for. So, but with the sense of constantly healing, it's also important that as we are doing this work, that we recognize it also as an opportunity for development and expansion. It doesn't have to look like we're broken all the time. It means that we are constantly evolving, we're constantly growing and expanding. And through that, we ascend in mind, body, and soul. So as far as, how can we continue to be more in alignment and strive to do so is to continuously be in pursuance of working on ourselves, continuing healing. And, taking opportunities to develop in whatever way that looks like, whether it's through our own lessons, our own traumas as we experiencing, recognizing them for, again, an opportunity to learn and grow, or workshops, mentorship sessions, connecting with different groups of people where we're gaining new knowledge and understanding as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Even for me, I find like one of the things I share with the audience is doing a body scan, which you're familiar with Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
So body scan's a huge thing that I do in the morning. I check in and see energetically, like, where is my body
Mm-hmm.
and how is it impacting me internally? You know, like, where is my mind the first time I wake up? And even just 5 minutes a day make a big difference. So then I can consciously allow my human being, like my human physical form, to align with my soul form as well, right? So I think
Absolutely.
that's like a huge part, a great tip for any of you if you're having a hard time distinguishing as you know, go through these karmic lessons, is just like intuitively just allowing yourself to bring practice of understanding those two things need to be balanced, and they're not just one or the other or them together. It's
Absolutely.
a separate energy, which I feel personally.
Do and absolutely, and to your point, you know, energy is everything. Everything is absolutely energy. It's just the amount of, like, how it's measured is the difference between an energy being felt or seen or touched within our five senses or our physical body. Our physical body is energy. It's a denser form of energy. Our energetic body housed within our physical body is energy. It's just a smaller molecule, if you will. It's not measured to the capacity of our body or the physical realm. So they are housed together. They are very much cohesively intertwined, although we recognize them as separate, but they do play off of each other in so many different ways.
Yeah, you can't kind of feed off without the other in a way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to your point of the body scan, you know, I always really try to encourage the importance of, we begin and end with self. Everything begins and ends with self. So when we begin addressing the self by taking time intentionally to check in with our energetic body first and recognize what's going on and getting familiar just on a basis of our own energetic body and what we're feeling and what we're thinking and sensing, only then can we truly use discernment of what is outside of ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I was gonna say also, tell me a bit about the responsibility of the human body. Now that we know the soul is like the context of the experience, if you will, and then there's the human body, right? And I know everyone has their different ways, but I personally, I'm a big believer in reincarnation in different forms, not just the human, but in, you know, animals and plants and various things as well. So I guess, what's the form of, like, what's the responsibility of the human being, the human physical form, and how does that be like, what's its part of our shadow work and our expansion of the soul?
Great question. You know, we're all familiar with the term free will. So each and every one of us has free will. We were gifted that with this opportunity for the human experience. But with the gift of free will comes the responsibility for ourselves and our actions and our decisions and our karmic contract, how we choose to address the karmic contract and walk this path. So when we talk about calling back our power, calling back our responsibility and returning home to ourselves, that is ultimately our responsibility, how we choose to do that, and recognizing that everything again begins and ends with self. How we choose to take care of ourselves and direct ourselves is our responsibility. How we choose to heal and, you know, decide to take on these lessons and these experiences is our responsibility, just as everyone else is their own responsibility. And that's also, you know, a level of conscious awareness too, to recognize I am responsible for myself just as everyone else is responsible for themselves too.
Yeah. And I think it's also, that goes into, like, I think physical as energy as well. You know, I feel like a lot of people, especially in this time, you know, we feel like we want to overwork ourselves, our soul, or vice versa. We overwork our physical form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of people find their lessons, or a lot of people find this sense of, I guess you can say, awakening where universe notices that imbalance and kind of tries to balance it out of the force, if you will. So it's really interesting once you can do the context of the difference between the soul and the human body. It can really allow you to understand, like when you are doing shadow work, for example, integration. I'm a huge person on talking to people about when you do deep shadow work or when you're doing inner work, integration is super important. And for those who might not be familiar with it, it's just the period of after releasing so much, it's just being with that new energy. It's being with that alignment, right? And a lot of people feel, you know, the sense of being in such a masculine society, we force ourselves to, oh, put a time on it. And I know I have as well in the past as well. So just again, going over the simplicity of what the soul is, what's the human experience allows us to just be more gentle and aware of what we need to do to allow that healing to fully form in our soul, to fully form in our karmic responsibility, if we will, of course. But
yeah,
that's super interesting that you mentioned that.
well, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I think sometimes people, you know, they envision spiritualism and enlightenment as this like rainbows and butterflies, but we have two sides to us, just like a sword. Just there's duality and polarity in everything, and
Yeah.
it's not about bypassing or disregarding our shadow.
Yeah.
It's important that we recognize and we embrace our shadow in order to learn the lessons and bring that cohesiveness. And
Yeah, I'm so
so,
happy you mentioned that too, because that's another thing too. We can't take too much of the yin or too much of the yang. We have to make sure that we're evening both of the sides. And I've seen, I'm sure you guys, if you want to share as well, like your experience going through this, but you know, do you find yourself maybe expanding more of the soul internally, or maybe expanding more of the physical form? And how do you feel that imbalance? What are some things that you've noticed? I know for me, if I'm not doing the deeper shadow work, it's almost like my external form creates the shield. And it's really hard to get to me energetically and just intuitively, all in all. And I know physically when I'm exhausted, then my soul feels the sense of, I guess you can say, it goes to its shadow self or its darkest spots to find energy, right? And it happens to all of us, right? And it's just so interesting that, again, like I said, that constant responsibility that we have, whether it's healing, whether it's, you know, body scanning, whatever you prefer, we need to do that at all times. And I think this year has really allowed people to go inward so much more than they expected for such a long period of time, where we're not running away from things, we're not filling it with pleasures and whatnot. You know, it's kind of like universe is like, too bad, we're gonna make you fit with this for over a year and maybe more until the world decides to reset. And I think it's honestly the best thing that could happen to us. I know everyone has their different thoughts on that.
I agree.
But I honestly think that we needed that purge, because, you know, if it wasn't the case, I think we would just be robots and empty souls living on this, you know, this lifetime, which is not fair to us and our future lifetimes to come. So super interesting.
Yeah. And to your point too, of, you know, the universe trying to bring into balance again. For so long, many of us lived out of balance. Many of us, you know, we sought validation and our power outside of ourselves for far too long, and putting our power in the hands of others, when in all actuality, we were responsible for that energy.
Exactly. Yeah, it's ours. And that's the thing I always tell people, like even the worst experiences, which again, that comes from a space of, it's the healing process of forgiving to that point, but it's all mirrored from our energy, from our being, right? And this actually flows perfectly, because we have a question on the dark night of the soul, and just talking a bit about that. That's something that a lot of people have been asking questions on. I felt like that would be a great question to ask you, like, what exactly is the dark night of the soul? Like, what does that look like? How do you know you're experiencing that?
I'm like, how would you define the dark night of the soul, though?
I feel like it's a point of realization where, like, you've gone through like almost the center pinpoint of your karmic lesson, and your body just needs to recuperate completely. Like the human body needs to recuperate so much that it actually creates an isolation from the world. That's how
Absolutely.
I see it. Like it's a time of like complete isolation and completely submerging in yourself for whatever period of time that you need. And a lot of people that tend to go through the dark night of the soul, some of which I know they, you know, they don't really connect with people. I know I've experienced it in my past. I didn't even know it was considered the dark night of the soul, where I just disconnected completely. But I had to go through that, like you said, that shadow self for a long period of time for me to learn where I needed to be. So that's how I would explain it. I don't know if you would explain
Yeah,
anything else.
that terminology, I'm like, how do I navigate that terminology?
Yeah.
Something to really recognize is that ascension is never linear. Our human capacity always wants to think we're on a linear line, but in all actuality, we're not. It
Yeah.
is very much a spiral, and that's just part of the human experience. And, again, we have to be able to go through darkness in order to really understand and honor and respect the lightness that we are opening ourselves up to in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I know I've had my dark times, and it's through those dark times, even though I didn't want to acknowledge it at that time, have really been monumental, shifts that I needed to
Yeah.
get through.
Yeah.
So that comes back into that perspective of respecting and honoring both the dark and the light
Yeah.
in order to understand this is a growing opportunity for us.
And I love that you said that too, because it's like that balance. If you're so much in the light, then if you want to use dark night of the soul, it forces you to go into that dark until the balance is achieved, right? And some of
Absolutely.
the things that people mentioned is, like rebirth and death. That's really the essential thing.
Yes.
It's you're going through this death, this ending to rebirth yourself in your darkness, right? And
Absolutely.
finding that light, no matter how deep in the soil that you get into that earthing and rebirth yourself, whether it's the core of the earth, if you will, and then coming back to it. I think that's essentially what the energy of the experience of the dark night of the soul would be, at least from my experience and what I've heard from others.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, from what I've seen as well, that creates this sense of, again, integration process. Even when people come back rebirth, it's like now we're getting used to that new living. It's like a baby taking its first steps, right? You're kind of
Yeah.
a little bit wobbly, and then after a couple times you get into it. And ironically, you're a new mom, so funny alignment of what I just mentioned. But yeah, like, the baby is kind of a little bit nervous, and probably there's that sense of fear going into it, but it makes its way, and that's the beauty of the darkness, right? It's like we bring into this new life,
Totally.
which is beautiful.
And, something to add to that, which I share with a lot of people too, is especially when they're on the spiritual path, or they're becoming more, raising their vibration in so many ways. Energy is kind of like a tide too. Like we have our spiritual experience and we have our human experience. And sometimes that tide of the spiritual experience is out. And that's really an opportunity the universe or source is giving us to have and live and marinate in the human experience, because we have
Yeah.
to at that time. And then that energy comes back in, and then we're in that heightened sensitivity and that clarity and that awareness. And I like to share this with people because sometimes when that tide is out, it can be very discouraging. It
Mm-hmm.
can be difficult because we are like, what is happening? Like, I feel very off. I feel not centered into myself. And it's important, again, to honor those times and honor those shifts and those seasons, because they are opportunities for us to really delve more deeper inward.
Yeah. And I always tell people when we're on this journey as well of like deepening that soul and that human experience, or the energy in general, there's always another couple doors that open, right? You open one door, there's another one. It never ends. Like I always get this question, Chica, when's the shadow work going to be done? I'm like, honestly, the day that your soul is done here. Like it's always constantly here. But that's the beauty of it, right? You get to feel that advancement of your soul, and it just keeps on layering every lifetime, which is amazing. And I think going back to what you mentioned earlier, some ways that you can do it, like healing, I love it because it's like almost every single time you learn something different about your soul. You learn something different about, ancestrally, your past life. There's so many parts that you can learn from that makes you part of that collective energy that created you, right? And
Yes.
That's the connection of the human body, right? It's two souls coming together to create energy of this birth, of this person, of this being into a soul that's meant to be in this lifetime. So it's really beautiful to see it that way. And people were mentioning a little bit about the polarity of the two as well, that we talked about in the advancement of the shadow work too. I think that's a big part. Now that we're talking a little bit about the advancement, I want to talk a bit about the energy, because I know that was something that you wanted to shift into as well. So talk to me a little bit about like energy and how important it is for us as we advance ourselves through this experience of growth.
Absolutely. So I briefly touched on the fact that everything is energy. There's different like densities of energy, if you will. And through our human experience, we learn through our energetic emotions. And we all have a very wide range of emotions in which we perceive and experience the different lessons, the karmic lessons and experiences throughout our lifetime. So when we start understanding that it's important that we're processing through our emotions to learn the lessons, then we can start doing a lot of the deeper work when we start to recognize and like, how does this make me feel and whatnot. Energetic emotions, from my understanding, we have our chakra systems in our auric field, and our chakras are very much associated with just different elements of our capacity, and are on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a mental level, and how we store these different experiences and lessons. If we don't process them, we essentially, our energetic body delegates where it wants to store that lesson that will come up later and surface later. Now, energy that is suppressed in the body, like emotional traumas, for example, can manifest in different ways. Most commonly, emotional triggers. We've all experienced situations where we're triggered by something and we probably don't know why we're triggered. Why does this relationship make me feel so scared? Why does this person really like peeve me? Why do I get so upset when I drop a pen on the floor? Those are triggers. Why does my mother-in-law just like make my hair stand up on the back of my neck? And other examples are on a physical level, the physiological effects of energetic suppression, which you kind of touched on too. We've heard of people with, worry issues having serious stomach digestion issues, people exhibiting anxiety issues having lung issues, or anger issues having back problems. Those are the physical manifestations of these energetic suppressions within our bodies. And if left prolonged, can become disease.
Yeah. I have a couple things that on that note, just on the basis of comments that have been coming up. And I also want to share that one of the followers just said this live is very perfect divine timing. Let's just do that. So that's great that a lot of people are resonating with it. And if you guys have questions, feel free to ask in the comment section. But I want to ask a little bit more about 3 specific things that I've noticed a lot of people asking questions on. So let's just say, relationships, for example, and exes coming in. That's definitely a big theme for this year of like, cords that haven't been fully unbounded. So I guess for you, like on the basis of like symptoms being shown, what are some symptoms of energy that, kind of confirms that people need to release that specific person or being or soul? Yeah, I know that's a big full question, but I guess like just the broad symptoms for some people. Yeah,
and everyone is unique, but there is generally some themes that play into hand with this particular subject, if you will. I mean, you can recognize when something's toxic, when you feel it in your gut, when you are so, extreme hot and cold with someone. That's not balance. That's not harmony. So you would recognize that just in any relationship. But when it comes to matters of the heart with, significant others in those types of relationships, if it's not being reciprocated, if it's a volatile emotional like experience, that's probably a neon sign saying there's something off with this. And with that being said, especially when we've all had that twin flame, if you will, that one person where you're like, oh, I just, I'm obsessed with him, but I don't know why. Like, he's horrible to me. You know, that is probably a karmic relationship that you've actually needed to learn and recognize this is not healthy and I don't deserve this.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to continue this cycle, because it will continue in every lifetime unless you cut it off and you choose to consciously shut it off, which is not easy for many people because they're not in a place of emotional and energetic strength, in maybe mental maturity and experience and development to say, I don't want this for myself anymore. This is not what I deserve.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because a lot of people have been mentioning, I've been tested with my twin flame coming back into my life. And I always tell people there's two responsibilities of a twin flame. Some of them are for power couples, and some of them, most of them, are to teach you something. It's
Absolutely.
not necessarily meant for you to be with that person, depending on the story of that, those two souls. But I love that you said that, like, you're attracted to that person. You don't know why. You keep going back to that relationship, even though it's abusive, but it's that pull, that polar, that magnet kind of feeling, if you will, my words. But it's this feeling that you get that's so undescribable. And even though your soul knows that it shouldn't be there, it's how do I disconnect? And that's another thing, when you understand of developing the soul, such as healing and doing that work, it can help you increase your vibration so you can recognize and change the perspective and understand what is the responsibility of that person that is in my life. Why did they come back into my life? Doesn't mean necessarily it's meant to create that, but that's really interesting. I think you're going to say something on.
I was going to say too, just in the realm of like that dissension, a lot of us have to learn our worthiness. Yeah. That is a huge piece of us, being embodied and coming back into alignment with ourselves, is that sense of worthiness, which we essentially lose as we descend into this lifetime, into this physical realm. And when we feel that worthiness, when we recognize that worthiness and that value within ourselves, which is outside of ego, not talking about like an overactive root and a very overactive ego, but truly like respecting and honoring our worth and our value, that's when we can recognize what we deserve and what we no longer choose to accept as tolerable in our lives.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to also say that another one that keeps coming up is abundance. A lot of people seeing their pains. I love how you nod in a shirt. Yes. Their pains in abundance. And a lot of people sharing, like, I don't know what's going on, especially in this time of like where it's very telling of, what we did and what has come to that energy. I guess, what are some physical or like common, I guess you can say, I don't want to say symptoms, but signs is a perfect word. Signs that maybe that person needs to deep dive a little bit more in the money relationship, or just abundance in general. Like I always say, abundance is not just money. Abundance can be love. Abundance can be in different forms, right? So I guess in the sense of money, yes, but it could be love, it could be home, it could be something that makes you feel secure and roots you, right? And makes you feel like you have the resources to do what you want, or to have the life that you want to paint for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And something to note on too is like money, the way we as humanity view money is very much in a different capacity in which it truly exists. Money is just a form of energy. It's a dense form of energy that happens to be a piece of paper. So when we recognize that money is just energy, and we start treating it just as energy to create energetic exchange, which is energy is constantly in flow and it has to be in constant, circulation. We start to open up to a different vibration of energy and really treating it as it is, a form of energy. It's not an end all be all. It doesn't buy us happiness, but it is a tool to buy us the things that we need within this lifetime. In the human experience too, we have the 12 universal laws, but we also have laws that apply to the human experience. And one of them is paying taxes and being responsible with our money. And, as far as being able to raise our vibration to match that of which we are calling into our life, whether it's security and safety and abundance in any form, whatever that looks like, we also have to raise our vibration to match it too. And that takes work. That takes us working through the energetic body and the emotional body and literally releasing through our own process that weight that keeps our vibration down. And that's our energetic baggage.
Yeah, it is. And I think one thing too is I love that you said that, because one story that came up, and I wanted to ask you a question after this, but I remember I had that same feeling where you said, the 7 laws and whatnot, where I wasn't giving in the way energetically that I should be. And in doing that, universe decided to balance it back by taking what I was getting, right? And I
Absolutely.
remember specifically having just being at the right time, right place, and accepting it out of free will, to have someone help me years ago with my business. And, I had maybe $1,500 to my name at that point. And I was like, worried and stressed, and as all of us are, right? But then I kind of brought myself to realization of my soul, and, understanding, this is a lesson. Like, this isn't the first time this same opportunity happened, but I decided to turn it down because I wanted to keep it to myself out of a space of lack of abundance, right?
Yes.
So when I put it in and I invested all that I could to this one person over a month of mentoring, my business shifted so quickly, and literally tripled just by having that time and
Yeah.
understanding and trusting universe and saying, hey, this is my sole purpose. It feels intuitively right. My gut's telling me I'm going to invest it. I know right now I can't see the money, but I will trust that it will come to me. And huge shifts happened at that point. So that's like a great story to kind of show you how you can probably shift that way. I wanted to ask you, I guess, like, what is maybe a recent situation that you've noticed that was maybe a soul or karmic lesson for you? And how were you able to take that and learn? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm sure. I mean, I am transparent enough and humble enough to say that I am living the human experience. It doesn't matter where I am on my spiritual level. Like, I still have lessons every day. Probably the most frequent is my poor husband that has to deal with my hormone shifts and my pregnancy right now.
Well, there's a lot, there's a human you that you're also creating
Yeah,
and
but
embodied.
it's like I recognize that I get triggered by certain things that are just things I'm still working through and that are constantly in motion. And my husband, who's just an amazing man, puts up with it, but in a sense that I actually can recognize like what I'm doing wrong so I can address it. I would say that's like a big lesson. But in regards to money and business, I do want to touch on that too, because, I've had experiences in the past where I had to learn that money is a tool. It is just a tool and it needs to be circulated.
Yeah.
And I can give you a big example. 5 years ago, I went through a really major shift. No, probably over 5 years ago, I went through a major shift in my life. And when I was trying to build a business outside of my spiritual business, and I was going through a lot of different difficult times, and I had $800 to my name and literally a suitcase, living in Southern California by myself, no family around. And that's when I had a serious spiritual awakening too, because I had to learn to surrender and trust. Part of the human experience is listening to our intuition when it's calling to us, and trust in the process. Because if we can't trust in what we are sowing as seeds, and trust in our intentions and our integrity and what we're aspiring for, it's not going to come back around.
Yeah. And I think even just trusting other human experiences too. Because remember, the thing that really comes back to me and that I'm really love is like, if your soul is a representation of the collective, right? And you're able to trust in the collective, then you will get more from that, from that energy of trusting, that energy of like, love and happiness that you're putting out from yourself, from your soul, you'll receive that. And that goes into, attraction and whatnot. But it's crazy because similar thing with what you mentioned, where like didn't have enough money to get on a flight, was halfway across the world at one point. And I was like, okay, so there's no flights going out tomorrow. I have to leave my Airbnb at this time. I have no one that I can like chat to or ask. And it so happened that, one of the gatherings I went to during that time of the trip, one of the girls I connected with, and we talked about spirituality, and we just clicked. It was like, two souls just connected. It was meant to happen. And her and her partner hosted me, and they said, stay as long. And it wasn't even like I asked, it just happened like, are you staying another day? Don't book your flight. Stay over, made a meal, drove me to the airport. It happened that I got a random sum that was enough for me to get home from my business
Good.
at that point when I was starting. So all these things, but again, that lesson is to show you, or even for you as well, that because we are the collective energy, if we believe in the collective energy, we create that, right? And I think that's something that's really telling for right now, right? If we believe in the collective of fear, then everyone feels the collective of fear, right? But if we have
Absolutely.
control and our responsibility of our energy to, protect it, but also believe in how we can shift it, there can be so many different telling things that can happen from a society point of view, but also from our own personal view, which I think is really big to note.
Absolutely. And to your point too, energy, all the energy that exists is already existing. It cannot be
Yeah.
created and it cannot be destroyed, but it can be transmuted. And that's a personal choice. That's our opportunity of free will and how we start to shift the energy around us and the energy that we are, exerting out.
Yeah.
I talked about this a couple times since the beginning of the COVID epidemic, when people have been in a state of heightened sensitivity,
Yeah.
where it's really raw what has been surfacing for many people, and
Mhm.
not many people not being able to recognize it in that moment, and people being triggered by others. We create ripple effects. What we put out can very easily ripple, and whether or not we choose to recognize it in the moment and transmute it and shift it is a choice and a responsibility of ours. And especially for those of us who are consciously aware of things,
Mhm.
it's almost like better. It's like Catholic guilt. Like you already know better, so you should be doing better. We
Yeah.
have that responsibility to consciously shift that energy that we're putting out, not just on a regular basis, but as it's coming past us and through us.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's one question that I have that I want to, on the basis of energy, um, just understanding more about ego. So one of the questions was a little bit about like, why is ego so bad? And I use the word bad as an energetic word, but I mean like, I guess, why do people think that the ego is such a bad, and that is something in our society, if people will, describe people's personality, or that person has an ego and whatnot, what does that mean in a soul, or like, I guess, a spiritual space, and how does the ego play on our growth of the
Absolutely.
soul?
The ego. I'm neutral about the ego, and I think it should be viewed as ego, as neutral, not a bad or a good thing. It
Yeah.
is how we address it and we recognize it. The ego is part of the human experience. It's developed in so many ways, really for out of our like instinctual capacity for
Mhm.
our mode of survival. It's the same thing with the critical mind. It is, we have it for a reason, for survival, to help us navigate. And I think ultimately deep down, ego has the best of intentions for us, just like our subconscious and critical mind. But if we don't manage it, that's when it runs amok, because
Yeah.
we start feeding it and it gets bigger and bigger to the point that it's not in balance, it's not in harmony, it's not respecting who we are at our core, and it in so many ways overtakes us.
Yeah, I think it's more
So
of like, sorry, you're gonna say
no,
something.
that's okay.
I was just gonna mention that the ego is, like you said, perspective. It depends on how you define that word the first time that you were presented that word, right? For me, I think ego comes from a space of the shadow. That's how I see it. It's, shadow self of things that you've disregarded, and how that portrays to the external world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think one of the biggest things, it's not to say it's a bad thing, it can actually show you a lot of the light and the darkness that someone has to do, right? It just depends on what you choose to shape it as. And I think one thing that's really neat is being able to just balance the ego. I think having a bit of it allows you to understand where its place is to your soul expansion.
Yes.
And I think that's important. I know other people will say other things, or everyone's,
Yep.
obviously open to perspective. But I think through my experience, I do think that the ego reminds us of things that are in the light, in the soul, in the human experience, in the earth underworld or above world, or whatever you want to call it, in other dimensions essentially. And it can teach you so much. So I think it's great to learn a little bit more about how your ego actually plays a role in your shadow work.
Definitely. And the same thing you said it so beautifully and like so clearly. So that was like perfect. But ego in a good sense, gives us that drive to do things. It gives us that confidence to do things. And if we don't have that, how are we able to step up into this place of calling back our power and not fearing, stepping away from fear, essentially?
Mm-hmm.
But again, go ahead.
No, sorry. We're just like in a flow. No,
yeah.
Go ahead.
But again, it's like, do you let it completely expand itself and overtake and, run amok, or do you keep it in check and be humble about it?
Yeah. And I think that's where the sweet spot is. It's how to recognize it, control it in a way, it's almost like a plant, if you will, it's there, you water it. You don't water it too much because you don't want to kill it, but you water it a bit, and you water your shadow self, you water your lights, your light self as well. But in all aspects of it, you never want to overwater some parts of you, because that's where, a little bit double-edged sword, a little too much of something can turn into something else, right? Another question we got is just, can you explain dreams and how our soul wanders? And I love this question because dreams is a big part of, I think for me personally, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I have a lot of connections to soul with dreams, and I get a lot of questions with people with dreams. I know my mom and we connect very deep with that, and she has her gifts. I feel like she's not as connected as I am, because she's not as conscious. She's able to though, but we always shared a lot of connections with certain dimensions with dreams. So can you explain a little bit more about what are the roles of dreams in the soul and the being of the human experience?
Absolutely. So, I mean, souls are quite multi-leveled in the sense of the influence of our dreams at certain states of our sleep too are very influenced by our subconscious and our critical mind. So with that being said, it's through that openness, if you will, that theta state, when our subconscious is wide open and our conscious critical mind takes a step back and isn't in control of things, that we can be dreaming about things that are deep rooted in ourselves, that our subconscious self, our shadow self, is asking us to acknowledge and reflect on. Now, deeper from that, when we get into like spiritual communication, if you will, energy at the higher realms and entities in the higher realms, it's more of like a telepathic communication. It's not the human experience. It's not the human language, if you will. Yeah. And I try to explain this every time I have a client that's like, what does this mean? Or like, I had this image, or I had this dream. We have our own language with source, with the collective, with our guides and our spiritual councils. And it is very tailored to your perception and how you perceive it. So even though someone might ask me something intuitively, I can start picking up on it. I always encourage to like reflect on like, well, what does it mean to you? Yeah. Because it's through your own acknowledgement do you truly start to understand what it is.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing too. Like I always tell people to kind of bring it into soul, but also off track, connecting to other realms such as spirit guides and whatnot. They have different ways to communicate with you if they want to, right? And a lot of people get frustrated when they're like, I'm doing the soul work, I'm doing the deeper work, but they're not, I don't know why, I just keep seeing numbers or keep seeing this. And I always tell them, as humans, we prefer communicating differently, right? Some people like calling, some people like texting. It's the same on the other dimension, like one of my spirit guides, I connect with fire. So whenever I do a healing, I light a candle and I can communicate with them through fire. For others, it's talking. For others, it's dreams, So I always tell people, when you search up something or if you're thinking of something, ask yourself, like, how does that make you feel? Where does your mind go to that? Where does the conscious mind go to that? You know what I mean? Or maybe it could even be possibly like something you were worrying about and subconsciously you manifested that into a dream, right? So it's not just one thing that a dream means. It can mean multiple things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's really important. We just had another question on this is actually quite a common question I get a lot, in the dreaming, of the sense of dreaming of someone over and over and over again, and what that means. Because a lot of people with, manifestation, law of attraction, and again, I want to hear your response on
this.
What does that mean on like, if you are dreaming of that person, what is it like? Is that a sign? Is that spirit talking? Is that telepathic? Like what does that mean essentially?
So we have like our etheric cords, if you will, which we can literally create simply saying hello to someone. We've experienced in a grocery store simply looking at someone and seeing if that look is reciprocated or not. That's an etheric cord. And some of those cords are more dense, more thicker, like having a conversation with someone and actually developing that energetic connection. And again, they're energy. So they're not, it's not like we have an actual cord physically attached to someone. And that can definitely be carried over into the capacity of like telepathic communication because it's energy. We're exchanging energy.
Yeah.
So in regards to dreaming about someone, it could simply be that you telepathically are connecting in that moment. It could also be an intuitive awareness of, I need to reach out to that person. That person needs me at this time.
Yeah.
In my own experience, personally, when I dream about someone, it means that I need to probably call them like immediately because there's something going on. I've had on several occasions.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I just say this in my own experience, so it doesn't apply to everyone. But when I've had dreams, especially if they're very lucid and that person is very much coming clearly in, and I'm feeling in that awareness of why they're in my dream, there's a reason, whether they've passed over or they're going through something really difficult or they're just simply needing me to hold space for them. Yes.
Yeah. No, I that's actually really interesting because for me, if it's someone who passes over, the room is the same and I always know. And if it's the person already did it or they're about to. And like one example is like when I didn't go to my grandfather's funeral, I dreamt with him and we had coffee together and it was like having that time with him until he completely went over.
Yes.
Or like my cousin who she had leukemia and people were, just so into the sense of energy of fear, which goes back to, protecting our energy. But intuitively, I knew it was like you said, you had to call, there's something going on 2 weeks prior to that, right? So I think it all comes down to, like you said, if it's either you need to call the person, like how do you feel when you wake up? Like when you're in that theta wave still, like do you feel the need of urgency? Do you feel the sense of, the need to call them, or maybe you're thinking about them or even manifesting them as well? But there's also the double-edged sword where I do see people where they obsess so much about maybe that specific person and it creates, in this lucid dream and
that's more stemmed out of the subconscious and the critical mind.
Yeah.
And I do want to kind of expand a little bit more on the dreams in the spiritual capacity, especially when it comes to loved ones who have passed over, or the spirit realm. Many of us have certain clairs, certain psychic sensitivities that maybe we were born with or we developed through our lifetime. We all have the capacity to tap into those. Some are more developed, some it's going to take a long time to develop, and some just have no interest in developing them. That's fine. But through our release of our critical mind, when we go into like certain states of sleep and where our actual mind is not delegating and dictating through the 5 human senses, that's when we're most able to perceive without fear, without control, for the spirit realm to actually, and our spirit guides too, to be able to interact with us in a way that we're going to be receptive of it and not be reactive of it.
Yeah. And that's a great tool of that is actually hypnosis. I love that because you're just fully able to immerse in the now and the being, like you said, with all senses. And that can be very, very powerful. So I think that's a beautiful way to, if anyone feels called to get more clarity with perhaps other souls to help you with your soul growth, that's a great place that you can tap into as well for support, which is awesome. We're getting a couple more questions on a lot of people just asking a bit on substance, which is an interesting question. So when having substance, does that affect lucid dreams, such as cannabis and whatnot?
Yes. So anytime that we are diluting our reality, it definitely can affect the different states of hypnosis, if you will, in which we're able to obtain or allow ourselves to delve into. So we go through states of hypnosis on a regular basis. We've all experienced when we're like driving, but like mindlessly, or taking a shower, or brushing our teeth, we're actually entering a state of hypnosis. And that's when our critical mind is just like a computer going on sleep mode, just takes a step back to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when our subconscious mind can be a little bit more open in that sense.
Yeah.
So when we interfere with that natural mechanism of our nervous and our sensory systems, whether it's through alcohol or substances, it interferes with that natural ability to release and step back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's also like the substance of nature too. It depends on the nature of the substance. At least for what I know, I feel like, for example, a lot of people say certain substances that can actually, clog your throat chakra, for example. And that's a huge part of the inner soul, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
part with the alignment of energy. And like through personal experience, I feel like, for example, plant medicine is a way of you working with earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I have seen people use it intentionally where it can help evolve and allow you to shift your perspective out of the body experience and put intention into the space. But I always tell people to question your purpose of using that substance, right? Because
Absolutely.
if you're blocking it with a pleasure or something that you don't want to face, then that is just going to create more feed to your ego or shadow self, right? So
100%.
yeah, exactly. So going to the dreams too, it's almost like a manifestation of where that substance can take you out of the reality of the human experience. And I think
Totally.
that can be very dangerous for some people because they can lose so much of their being and their consciousness, where depending on their surrounding and their environment, if they're able to come back and center, right?
Totally.
I think that's a huge part that can be judgmental to some people in their spiritual journey. Um, and I think that's super important. I don't know if you have any other points that you'd like to
Well,
share
I was
on
just going to
that.
say too, when I'm not pregnant, I do enjoy a glass of wine or, a cocktail or whatnot when I'm having the human experience, when I know that I'm not going to be needing to step into this space of me connecting in and
Yeah.
being responsible with it and having balance with it. Because again, we're here for the human experience.
Yeah.
But it's when you cross that line where you start to create a dependency on it,
Yeah.
that's in addictive behavior, and that starts creating an energetic cycle that does need to be addressed.
And I love that you said that too, because like for me, I don't know if it's for most people, I feel like for you too, the more you increase your deeper work, you heighten your energy. It seems like those substances are such at a lower vibration that you
Yeah.
don't want to put that into your body. Like for example, the wine, I love wine, I love wine tasting and everything, but for me, it's like there's a huge cutback since I've been shifting my vibration and tapping more into the energy work. But like you said, human experience, if you're not working, if you're not doing energy healing,
Yeah.
obviously you're human. That's
Yeah.
completely fine. You could have a glass of wine or whatnot. And I think that's important. So yeah, I think that's so key. I wanted to kind of finish it off on the points of 2 points, but one specifically on the responsibility of energy, because we've been talking so much on that. So, what is our responsibility in energy of like, I guess, knowing those two realms of the human experience and the soul being?
Um, so as far as our own personal energy, it is
Yeah.
our responsibility that we are recognizing that we are in power of our own energy, in responsibility of our own energy, of our own healing, of our own capacity, what energy we are putting out and what energy we are allowing in, which obviously takes time, it takes patience, it takes like intention,
Mm-hmm.
going into a deeper form of our own energetic capacity that is our own. It's ours, so we are responsible for it.
And I think also
Oh, go ahead.
protecting energy too, right? Because that's a big part that I think is so relevant right now as we do that soul work, if you will, or deeper work, protecting our energy to allow that to sit in. And
Totally. And
um, yeah,
oh,
sorry, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, our words are vibration. It's
Yeah.
a form of energy too. And something that I've kind of acquired from the collective over the last couple of years, and
Mhm.
what I like to share. So take it if you resonates with you and leave it if it doesn't. But when we say protecting our energy, the verbiage of protection means that we allow the power of something outside of ourselves to take control of
That's
ourselves
interesting. I really
or
like
can
that.
harm us in that sense. So I call them energetic boundaries because it is ultimately that. And boundaries are a sense, they are, a basis of self-love. How are we being responsible for our energy? How are we managing our energy and, managing the energy of others and whether or not we take it in or take it on to ourselves. So as far as energetic boundaries, I'm huge on that. This is my space, this is my time, and this is what I value. And whether or not I allow myself to be open with yours, or I choose not to take on your emotional baggage, that is a choice and it's a boundary I put into place.
I love that because I love that you said that because I am growing my vocabulary of energetic words, but I love that you said it's not protect, it's creating energetic boundaries, right? Because everything is energy at the end of the day. If you're protecting it, you're creating a barrier. You're not working with that and managing it essentially. And that's
Totally.
the importance of flow. Just like money, you're managing where it's going. You're not protecting it. You're not saving it. You're managing it. And I think that comes into a sense of understanding the words. And I love that. Like one other word too is, selfish, self-care. I always tell people it's not that, it's self-care, right? Because you're caring about your energy, you're caring about your being, you're understanding a bit about what you need at that time and how you can communicate that. And I think that makes a big difference on people's ability to understand how words affect them too on our soul journey, right? And that's a huge part of responsibility of energy is how do we put out words, whether it's on social media, how do we put out words in our everyday life with our family and friends, work setting, loved ones. That's a huge part. Baby, they're hearing it too. So it all goes somewhere. It doesn't just flow in the era. It goes somewhere, right?
Absolutely. And I will say fear is the antithesis of trust, of faith. And when we instill fear into the equation of feeling we need to protect ourselves, so now we're fearing that of what is exterior of us, even though we're all completely connected to everything.
Yeah.
Then again, we're kind of letting the ego run amok because now we're living in fear, and that's not a place that we should be living in. We can't be expansive and expressive if we're closing ourselves off energetically.
Yeah, and then we put ourselves in this box of what we can or cannot do, right?
Absolutely.
And that doesn't work towards the evolution of what we're supposed to do for our soul as well, right? And I love that because, even myself, I don't know about you, I think we have similar stories in different timelines, but going from a very ego-driven industry to a very balanced industry was a huge shift for me and like just an explanation of my awakening and energy. And I think if I were to put it in a box, if you will, or kind of constrain that evolution, I don't think I would be able to be even open-minded to the spot of where I am today, right? And
Absolutely.
One of the things I keep sharing with people this week is don't be afraid if after the shift of this year, you're not the person that you were before. You're not connecting with the things you connected with before. Or you can't, you're not shifting your lifestyle and whatnot. That's completely part of the experience, right? It's having multiple experiences in a lifetime, and that's what makes you grow. And I'm sure with you too, like going into you're having your business, taking on the spiritual journey into this beautiful business now. It wasn't just night and day. It went through its process to open that box. And
I had to, please believe me, I had to surrender. I am a Virgo by nature, and I'm very like that's how I normally work. But it's been a process to surrender and allow myself to be where I am today, which took time, practice, which took a hell of a lot of patience. But I'm glad I listened to my intuition and that calling and allowed myself that space, even though it wasn't easy, because that was incredibly transformational for me on every level, personally, professionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally.
It connects it all, right? It's like a bow. As soon as you untie that knot, it opens up into other parts of our life. It's not just one perspective, right? There's another perspective that overlooks it. I'd love to kind of like end it with the energy, I guess, of we have less than I think 70 days of the year around that. And I know a lot of people are still in this energy of uncertainty. So just learning more about how that feels with, energy and how coming back to us doing so much inner work this year and evolving and still being in the space of uncertainty and people accepting that. I know for me, I'm loving it, honestly, because it's just like, ooh, what's next? It's growing and in different ways yourself. So for you, I guess, like, what are some things that you feel are relatable for people to take on in terms of soul, human experience, and energy for the rest of this year?
Absolutely. We all have to begin somewhere. So for those of us who didn't utilize this time through this last year to really start stepping into taking responsibility for themselves and doing the work when time really was energetically slowed down for us to literally take the time to be with ourselves.
Yeah.
We can all begin anywhere, but for those of us who have actually been stepping into this path and crossing this energetic bridge, which I talked about a couple months ago, this portal of time of us like ascending in so many ways and energetically shifting, continuing that path as we go into 2021, because it's through that ascension, through that work that we've done thus far, that we've allowed ourselves to have a broader perspective in understanding how things are happening, why they're happening, and allowing us to surrender to them as we continue moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
For those who chose not to, just because they weren't open to it, maybe it wasn't karmically part of their path within this lifetime, whatever the different factors are, in my intuitive understanding of moving into 2021, I feel like it's going to be a complete, recycle of last year, of 2020. For
Yeah.
many people. And so
Mm-hmm.
for those of you who have, intuitively taken that time, and just even if it was one day, a step at a day, that's still 365 steps a year. And that's significant when you look back on it.
Yeah.
I commemorate you. And I really hope that you honor how far you've come in recognizing that, and you value it, because that's what's important. That's what intuitively you're meant to do at this time.
Yeah, I
And
feel like that's a good point too. You're saying and something.
I was gonna say, and I'm honestly like, this year's been great for me.
Yeah, that's same here. It's been like such a, I am so grateful for it. Like,
yes,
on a personal level, lots of releasing on various generations for me, which has been amazing to see that. And even YouTube, I would never even think that I would start a YouTube channel, yet alone have over 16,000 people listening. So that's a big shift, right? To hear, and for those who are willing to say, hey, I'm ready to do the inner work. I know this year was not what I expected, but I'm going to get all the tools that I need in order to do so, right? And to me, that is where I hope that everyone goes into the 2021, is continuing that path for those who have been doing the work. For those who haven't, well, we still have some time left to continue and to get a head start on it. And I think this year is definitely like the endings of a new beginning is definitely the theme of it, right?
yes,
Which is beautiful to see it kind of rebirth in an earthy way. I feel like it's beautiful.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It was
Thank
so
you for
great
having
having
me,
you.
and happy birthday.
Oh, thanks.
We didn't
Yeah.
announce that it's your birthday today.
Yeah, but I was more, honestly, I'm so grateful because I've been wanting to chat with you. I know you're busy and I respect your energy, but I've been wanting to chat with you for a while. So this is probably one of the best birthday gifts, is to do a live and talk about soul deeper work. And I'm like getting a little emotional today.
I'm like picking up on it
Yeah.
too. No, it's
Sorry.
truly
But
been a privilege to be a
oh,
part of this, and it really meant a lot to me. Like, even when we talked before that you even considered me to reach out and be a part of this, and to be able to, share this wisdom and knowledge coming from a full well, which I like to call it. When we have full wells, we're able to do this for other people, and that's what's important. And so thank you again for this opportunity. And I'm just really grateful, because my biggest concern was like, I don't know how I'll feel at 37.
yeah. For
I
you
don't know.
guys, for context, we didn't know she was going to go into labor during this time. So it's kind of playing it by week to see if she would be here. But so grateful to have you and your little one to join us and share your knowledge, because it's been amazing. For you guys who are on, just let us know if you have any questions in the comment section. Also go and check out Violet. She's amazing, such a beautiful soul. Go follow her. I learned a lot personally through her experiences and tips that she gives on Instagram. And she also does amazing energy healing. So if you feel called to, definitely go check her out. I'm sending you guys so much love and light. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and put notification bells for more lives. So thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you so much. Bye, guys.
Bye.